have with us today Mr. Gautam Mehra, who works at Fremetrix and is also a consultant at GIZ. He works in the field of circular economy. It's a pleasure to have you, sir. Sir, my first question is, could you please give us a brief about what are your contributions in the field of circular economy?
Mhm. Okay, so considering circular economy, I basically started working in this particular area from 2015-16 onwards. At that particular point of time, it was still a very nascent subject, resource efficiency in circular economy. My key contribution, and I think my biggest contribution that way, would be to develop the strategy for resource efficiency in circular economy for the electronics and electrical sector in India for the Niti Aayog. That particular strategy has now been developed into an action plan, and currently there are multiple ministries who are basically following that particular action plan and implementing it across the country in terms of the development of electronic and electrical products, and also looking at specific areas where there is a requirement to work in this particular area to basically institutionalize and establish the circular economy framework for this particular sector. So, as an example, you can say, how do you formalize the informal sector? How do you ensure that logistics costs can be reduced so that whatever waste is generated can reach the recycler, get recycled? How do you ensure that you can use secondary raw materials in terms of the production processes? How do you ensure you have eco design criteria which is developed so that the product which is manufactured can be recycled easily, can be repaired easily? So all of those things, the ministries, the Ministry of Electronics, the Ministry of Environment, Forest, they're all working together to actually try and institutionalize and establish this entire framework within the country, implement it so that we can move forward in this direction. This was about electronics. I have also been involved in the same similar kind of work as far as plastics is concerned, specifically plastic packaging. So if you see plastic packaging, there is a specific rule, a regulation called Extended Producer Responsibility Framework. So while my work at GIZ, I have been involved in developing this, or rather implementing this entire framework from the compliance perspective, the regulation perspective for the Central Pollution Control Board and the State Pollution Control Boards, and also try and establish different kinds of business models which would make the establishment of circular economy framework, its embedding with the different stakeholders in a sustainable manner. So that is something which I have been doing specifically in these two sectors. And yes, there is a lot of scope to actually work in the area of batteries, in the area of tires, in the area of vehicles, because this is where circular economy is going to be coming in the coming years.
Understood, sir. Sir, I have a question. How is our government promoting a circular economy?
So, in terms of the government promoting a circular economy in 2015-16, there were quite a few committees which were formed. And the government realized the fact that there are a lot of areas where it needs to institutionalize circular economy, because what is happening is, for any country to grow, there are three specific areas where it can basically contribute. So if you just go back to economics, the key three areas which we look at in terms of the contribution towards GDP, the gross domestic product, you will have agriculture, you will have services, and you will have manufacturing. Now, in India, the services sector has grown very rapidly. You see people doing software, you see tourism, hospitality, you see real estate, construction services. All of this has grown to a very large extent. And it has contributed significantly to enhance the GDP from 1990 onwards in a very fast paced manner. On the other hand, if you look at jobs will basically get created in manufacturing because services is slowly kind of becoming, uh, or rather is being driven a lot by technology. So the moment technology comes into the picture, you actually try to enhance efficiency, which is where the labor actually goes out of the picture. So manufacturing is something which will still require labor, and agriculture requires labor, but the returns in agriculture are very little. Plus, over a period of time, there has been huge amounts of migration which has happened from rural to urban areas as well, which is where it is important to enhance manufacturing. Now, manufacturing requires materials. India specifically is very rich in materials of minerals like, say, bauxite, which is used to make aluminium, iron ore, which is used to make steel. So India is good there. We have reserves. But if you look into manufacturing of products which we use nowadays, and electronics, of course, is a huge demand, and there are different kinds of products which have demand as well. In that particular area, to enhance manufacturing in the country, so the government came up with such schemes like Skill India, like Make in India. Okay, these particular schemes are one used to basically try and entice industry into investing in India, but industry will invest in India when they have access to materials as well. How do you get access to materials? You get access to materials through actually extracting secondary raw materials through a concept which is called urban mining. So, mining is one particular concept. Traditional mining is one particular concept where you go, you find their minerals, their ores in one particular area, you dig for them, and then you take out those ores, you basically treat them, and then you take out the metal from that, and then use the metal in the manufacturing process. Urban mining is basically mining for material from the waste which gets generated in urban areas because urban areas are the largest consumers in the world. We consume the maximum. The villages don't consume as much as we do. So, urban mining as a concept is something which has been devised for quite a few years. And India, in order to ensure that they were able to extract as much resources from urban mining, which could then flow into the manufacturing processes to enhance sustainability, to provide more labor, to provide more jobs, India basically adopted this particular piece. So if you look at the institutionalization of circular economy, it started with certain materials, metals, which would be used in manufacturing processes. And then you have these different schemes which have come out, which are actually ensuring that India moves towards that particular pathway which it is trying to create for itself.
Okay, sir. So this leads to another question. Like, why are some businesses hesitant to adopt a circular economy?
Well, some businesses are hesitant because whenever you mine for materials, the mining cost basically is just the economic cost which you pay for labor or some amount of the license cost which you would have given to the government to get access to that particular mine. But whenever you go about mining in one particular area, there are different kinds of costs which are involved as well. There is a social cost because the people who are living in those areas, you are trying to displace them. So there is a social cost towards it. No businesses pay that social cost. Then there is an environmental cost to it, an ecological cost, because you're destroying forests to basically mine. You're making railways, you're making roadways in areas where you're cutting down trees and you're destroying the environment that way. Now, for that, you don't basically have to pay too much. The government facilitates that particular piece. So, the cost of actually acquiring virgin material becomes far too less. Now, when you look at secondary material, the fact that you have to actually collect from somebody the waste that has been generated, you have to transport that across to a recycler. The recycler has to put up technology to actually try and recycle that material and extract minerals and metals from them, and then kind of go ahead and sell that into the market. The cost of secondary raw material is still a little higher because you account for all the business cost and all the transactional costs which happen whenever material flows from one stakeholder to the other, which is the value chain which has been created. That is where the cost of secondary raw material is higher than the virgin material, which is why businesses do not want to adopt circular economy principles or are hesitant or resistant towards it because they believe that the cost of their product will go up, which will make them less competitive in the market. But the good news for such kind of thing is that larger brands like, say, Apple, they are actually adopting circular economy and they're saying openly the amount of recycled material that they're actually using in the manufacture of their product. So, for example, an Apple iPhone, the amount of aluminum that is used in an Apple iPhone that comes from a secondary source, which is it is recycled. It is recycled aluminum which is being used, and that is how Apple is kind of trying to promote this entire piece of part of how brands can move towards use of secondary raw materials in areas which are not very critical to the functioning of the product, but ensures that they're more conscious about the environment and they are thinking about sustainability when they're putting their product on the market.
Understood, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah. Good morning, Devang.
Sir, I had a question. How will the highly increasing demand of critically important raw materials be met?
So, in terms of the highly increasing demand, you currently are reliant mostly on the virgin raw material, which you basically extract in the form of ore, treat it, and then kind of take the mineral out of it and put it into the manufacturing process. But I'll give you an example. Say you take the example of indium. Okay. Now, because we are using these devices where the screen is very important because that is what you see, okay, and that visualization, indium is one particular element in the periodic table which is going into the manufacturing of these screens. Now, indium currently is available in finite quantities mostly in China. 90% of the reserves of indium across the world are in China. But considering that there is a demand for smartphones and smartphones are now going to possibly cross the population of the world over the next 4 5 years, if we are looking at 7 billion people living on the planet, you will possibly have more than 7 billion smartphones on the planet. Consider the amount of indium that will actually be required to manufacture these smartphones. Then you have laptops, you have tablets, you have different other smart devices which are there, which all require indium. If we are able to extract all of this indium from these devices when they become waste, we would actually be able to channelize this. And businesses would need to do that because indium is a finite resource. You can use indium that comes out of China in the form of ore to a certain extent till it runs out. Everything is finite because we just have one planet. Until unless we are able to secure the supplies of indium in a manner which ensures that we are able to extract it from secondary raw materials from urban mining, we will not ensure sustainability of businesses in the long term. That is something which is really important.
Thank you, sir. I had another question. Is social sustainability the missing element in the circle?
So yes, of course. Of course, social sustainability is missing just because of the reason that businesses are not thinking about it and governments are not enforcing it. If governments start enforcing, and the entire rat race is about growth. How much can you grow? Today you are a 3 trillion economy, tomorrow you want to become a 5 trillion, then you have pathways in which you want to become a 30 trillion economy, you want to become the biggest economy in the world. This is one race which is never ending. But is this sustainable? Because people who are at the bottom of the pyramid are the ones who will actually suffer. And this suffering is no end because even if you find water, even if you find some mineral, or you find any kind of substance which might have any economic value in your eyes and could make into a product and then be sold in the market, you would always want to ignore the social side of growth, its impact, and try to just make economic viability and sustainability the key paradigm without even thinking about social sustainability or environmental sustainability for that matter.
And I had one last question. What is the role of rack pickers in the circular economy?
Oh, they are the ones who are the most important because they are the ones who actually collect all of the waste and then move it forward. So what happens is for any particular thing that you see, why does a soap get sold in the market? Or why and how many stakeholders are there when a soap is actually sold in the market? So you have a company. The company ties up with the manufacturer. The manufacturer actually ties up with a lot of people who provide him the raw material. The moment that raw material comes, so if you're manufacturing soap, you'll possibly need sodium hydroxide. All of you guys are science students, huh? So the moment you need sodium hydroxide, there's someone who will basically require sodium and treat it in a manner so that sodium hydroxide can then be prepared. It doesn't mean that you just put sodium into water, otherwise everything will just blast off. Okay, so you manufacture sodium hydroxide, you sell it to this guy who will manufacture the soap. The guy manufactures the soap, then he sends it to someone who basically package the soap. Once it is packaged and branded, then they will go to somebody who will transport that soap to a particular city. In a city, it will come to a carrying and forwarding agent. They will send it across to a warehouse. The warehouse will send it across to a stockist. The stockist will send it out to a shop, and you will go and buy it from the shop. In the entire chain, there is some incremental value which is created for each and every one of these stakeholders. Similarly, the moment you take that wrapper out and you take out the soap to use it, that wrapper has value for someone who is not very high up in the economic value chain right now. So that guy would want to demand that particular wrapper because it is paper in it. That guy, the moment he takes the wrapper, will sell it to somebody at a particular price because that guy knows someone who will be able to recycle that particular wrapper. So that way, the rack picker is at the heart of the circular economy because he is the one who will basically pick up the waste material and start channelizing it so that it can get recycled. A recycler will not have the wherewithal to come and pick up waste from your house just because he wants to run his business of recycling, because the logistics cost will be so high that he will not be able to make economic viability for himself by just recycling the material and selling it in the market. So a rag picker is one of the most important stakeholder as far as ensuring that the value chain for waste, or rather secondary raw material, is initiated. Otherwise, recycling will have no place in the modern world.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning. So one question just popped up in my mind. As to ask that, how can artificial intelligence be useful in developing or applying circular construction activities?
Circular construction.
Yes, sir.
What would you mean by circular construction?
Circular construction activities, such as the how can like in construction activities also there are some of the elements which are being wasted. So how can you say that artificial intelligence is being useful in developing those circular construction activities?
So see, I tell you, artificial intelligence, if you see the way it can become useful is the moment you are trying to use technology, because as human beings, we lack a lot of basic ethics. Okay, specifically the ones who live in urban areas. The first thing that we don't do is segregate our waste. We don't do that. If we do not segregate our waste, the mixed waste which basically goes out gets segregated by a rack picker who then moves it across to different stakeholders. Now, if say the waste is coming out from our household, it gets aggregated at one particular place. These are normally called dhalaos, which are there in areas surrounding houses, and then from the dhalao, it will go to one large place where this compactor will come and take it up and take it away. Now, such kind of work that happens basically leads to destruction of a lot of resources because the waste gets mixed up completely. Now, if waste is segregated and a waste can actually move along a line, and if you want to use artificial intelligence, You can use artificial intelligence to construct technology which will be able to ensure that it is able to segregate the waste which moves along a particular conveyor belt, which will lead to a higher realization of value for the waste that you are able to segregate and channelize across to a recycler. So what happens is, say a recycler who is recycling, say, PET bottles. No, we drink a lot of water from PET bottles whenever we go out. Now, the moment these PET bottles are received at his facility, the first thing that he has to do is basically wash the entire thing. Why does he have to do the washing? Because we throw PET bottle anywhere on the road, there is mud over there which is sticking to it. Okay, so he'll basically have to wash the entire PET bottle, and then he has to start his entire process. Now, washing of the PET bottle is very intensive process which requires two key elements. One, it requires a lot of electricity. Second, it requires a lot of water. So in terms of the water footprint or the carbon footprint that that particular factory which is recycling PET bottles is creating for itself is humongous. Just because of the reason that people like me and you choose to throw a PET bottle in an improper way rather than put it in a bin which is specifically meant for dry waste. Okay, so artificial intelligence can actually help you to realize further value, but technology is dependent upon human behavior. If human behavior changes for the better, technology will work like bringing in a lot of efficiency into the entire process. If human behavior does not change, technology can't help you. So as far as your question is concerned, yes, artificial intelligence can help you, but the kind of scenarios that need to be created are more theoretical right now, as it seems, rather than being practical because we don't behave properly.
I understand, sir. Like you said, what do you think about the companies? Can they align circular economy initiatives with climate goals or continue to treat these as discrete initiatives?
Oh, yes, of course. There are companies, as I gave the example of Apple, and there are companies who are trying to do this as far as plastics is concerned as well, where they're trying to recycle plastics and use it. There are companies presently in the automobile sphere, if you see, then Renault in France is trying to do something like this, where they're trying to use secondary raw material as well, and they're trying to focus a lot on repair as well. So all of these things are presently happening. And over a period of time, companies who try and pass on this message acquire a lot of customers and consumers who are basically looking at spending the extra buck but ensuring that they spend that money for a product which is more sustainable in nature than something which is kind of coming from virgin raw material.
Okay, sir. I have just one last question for you from my side. How will the transition to the circular economy reduce costs and create jobs?
So, one, of course, when you talk of rack pickers and you talk of all of these people in the value chain, jobs get created for these kind of people, which helps them to ensure that the waste actually reaches across to a recycler and gets recycled. So, you need more number of recyclers to come up as we consume more. But also the fact that the government is trying to come up with a policy framework on the use of secondary raw materials, which means recycled materials will be demanded by manufacturers, producers. So that ways it will lead to creation or make these particular jobs more important. The waste picker's job will become important. The recycler's job will become important. And there are also incentives which are coming up in the form of extended producer responsibility schemes, which come up, which actually pay them to collect more and more so that producers are able to meet their targets. Along with this, as India tries to push in, say, Make in India, Skill India, all of these different missions, these are aimed at enhancing the manufacturing sector in the country, but provided the fact that materials, minerals, metals, these become available. Now, the moment you actually embed a circular economy framework and you make recycling a very lucrative option, a business, you make collection of waste very lucrative, that is when the manufacturing also becomes lucrative because you would have material which would be available and people don't have to scout for virgin raw material in different countries. So, say if somebody is making a battery, a lithium ion battery in India, a key component is cobalt. Now, cobalt is available in a country in Africa called Congo. If you want to make batteries, then you'll have to basically first go to Congo, get cobalt from there, ship it, bring it to India, transport it to your facility, and then make the battery. What if you started recycling lithium ion batteries and just extracted cobalt within India itself and transported it across to that facility which is manufacturing? It makes your life much more easy. You don't have to ship it from 10,000 miles away. You can just kind of ship it maybe 500 kilometers, and that kind of gets you access to enough and more material to run your factory in a sustainable manner. It'll be cheaper for you. That is how this entire thing works. And within the country confines, the moment you do something, this is a concept called green fencing. You basically are not dependent on other countries. Say there is a trade embargo which comes up in some country, which is very important as far as raw material is concerned. What do you do then? Do you shut down your manufacturing facilities because that critical raw material is not available? You don't do that. So yes, the option of recycling, the option of getting access to secondary raw material is very, very important to ensure sustainability of manufacturing and production processes in your own country.
Good morning, sir. Now,
Yes.
we've been talking about India so much, and one of our major industries is agriculture. So, how do you think adopting circular economy will help in reducing agricultural waste?
So agricultural waste primarily, which is coming. So currently there are some certain projects which are also getting implemented in this area. So what happens is a lot of the agricultural produce which we consume presently comes from villages which are in and around urban spaces. So say in Delhi, you have different mandis which are there. There is Okla Mandi, there is Azadpur Mandi, there is Mehrauli Mandi. So different mandis which are there. And a lot of agri produce basically comes to these mandis from villages which are about 100 kilometers away, within the radius of 100 kilometers. Now, of course, when the produce comes over here, it also comes with a lot of waste. So say if you are consuming a cauliflower, now, the cauliflower comes in a whole. Whatever is left of the cauliflower that is not cooked, that is basically thrown as organic waste. Now, for one moment, if you start considering the fact that if Azadpur Mandi gave you the cauliflower without the waste elements in it, and the truck that actually brought in the cauliflower from the villages, that same truck actually takes away the waste back to the villages where it can be composted. Or you build up a facility in Azadpur where you can compost all of this waste and then send the compost back to the agricultural fields because that is where it is required. If you can do that, you actually create a circular economy in the agricultural sector as well. And all of the waste, which is kind of leading to these huge mountains within Delhi, whether you talk of Balaswa, whether you talk of Okla, whether you talk of Ghazipur, those will not be required. And these are the cause of methane emissions, which is very deadly for us as well, because we are breathing all of that. So simple ways to do it because transportation is also always happening. You require produce to come from the villages into the cities on a daily basis because we need food 3 times a day and we are cooking something or the other. So that will ensure that the moment this comes in, you are able to also transport it back to the villages after the compost is formed, or better still, you can actually start composting in your own houses to use them in small kitchen gardens which you set up, or use them in the parks that you have. That also helps. That also creates a circular economy because the greener the environment, the better it is for you. to be able to breathe at least.
Thank you, sir. Continuing, how does the idea of circular economy contribute to sustainable living?
So, whatever you require to live your normal life, the way you've been used to, you right now require a phone, a laptop, you require a television, a refrigerator, an AC, you require multiple different things. Okay? All of these things that you require today, if you are also able to give it back to the environment, so each and every product that you have has a finite life. Once the life of the product is over, you need to ensure that you are able to give it back to the environment by ensuring that you are able to, one, segregate your waste, two, give your waste away to someone who is authorized to handle your waste, ensure recycling of that particular waste, and also try and buy products and consume those kind of products which have a higher recycled content. That is how you contribute towards sustainability. Don't create waste. Treat waste as a resource, and this is a very, very important thinking which was actually initiated in our country only, something which we have forgotten. Just because the economic power of the country has gone up some notches. We don't think of our products which become waste as resources which we can channelize. If we are able to do that, then we'll make it more sustainable.
Thank you, sir. Now, as we have been talking about the pollution, recycling, etc., would you like to elaborate on how the circular economy can help reduce pollution?
So, circular economy, any particular product that you mine, you want, the first step is mining. You need the ore. So, let's take the example of, say, aluminium. Now, if you want aluminium, you will have to mine for bauxite. The moment you mine for bauxite, the entire process is goes through a kind of a it's a thermal process, requires a lot of coal to be burnt and the bauxite to be basically melted and the sludge to be separated and then the metal to be recovered from the sludge and then the metal to be used, and you can't use aluminium like that, so you'll have to kind of mix it with certain other materials and metals as well in order to produce the alloy that you will use in different production processes. This requires a lot of energy. This requires a lot of digging of the earth. On the other hand, say if you have a few aluminum rods which you are not using or which might have broken, and you just give it away to a recycler, the guy just has to melt it and then use the aluminum once again. That uses far less energy. Anything that has got to do with ore, whether you talk of iron ore, whether you talk of bauxite, copper, any particular metal that you are extracting from ore, you are using a lot of energy. And I read this small piece somewhere. If you have to extract 1 kg of gold, so all of you guys use electronic products, and in high-end electronic products, you have these green-colored printed circuit boards. These printed circuit boards have a lot of chips in them. Now, some of these chips that are there, they're basically made of gold. They're gold plated, silver plated. And the reason is very simple. We have all learned in our class 9s and 10s that the one of the possibly best conductors of electricity is gold. After that, there is silver, but we use copper just because of the reason that copper is cheap. And now they use aluminum as well because aluminum is cheaper than copper. Okay. But if you have to ensure that the use of a particular electronic produce or product, you have to use gold there in order to enhance the effectiveness of that particular product in terms of the output that it gives you, you can extract gold from there after that product becomes waste. So your laptop becomes waste, that printed circuit board will go to a recycler, he will extract gold from there. And I read it somewhere which says that the amount of ore which you will have to dig to extract 1 kg of gold and the amount of energy which you will use to melt the ore to basically get at 1 kg of gold, that is probably 60 times higher than the amount of printed circuit board that you will recycle to recover 1 kg of gold. 60 times. That is the quantum of carbon emissions which happen the moment you try to extract gold from ore rather than extracting it from a printed circuit board. And then there are many other things from where you can extract gold, but just considering 60 times the energy that you're basically using, that's an incredible amount. So if just if we kind of take the pain to become sensitized about such things, we'll be able to make the world a better place.
Yes, sir, I agree very much. So, for my final question, will moving towards a circular economy require changes in consumer behaviors?
Of
And are
course.
these changes happening?
Very few. I think you are the generation which is basically leading these changes because a lot of you go and talk to your mom and dad about source segregation of waste, about ensuring that you give your waste away properly, about not mixing wet and dry waste, about trying to compost wet waste at your homes so that you are able to ensure that it can be used for gardening or other kind of horticultural purposes. But I think there is a long way to go still, because this education about how do you ensure that the waste that you're generating, you're sensitized about the fact that it is also a resource which can be used by someone else, or maybe by you yourself after it gets converted into a new product. That level of sensitization, I think, if it happens, then consumer behavior is something which will lead to that kind of sensitization. But there is a long way to go still. We need to ensure that people who are getting access to such resources, they are able to understand the value of them, not only from the economic perspective, because that's the amount of money that they spend to buy it, but also the social and the environmental impacts that get created if they do not dispose of their waste properly. That is something which needs to be educated to them so that we are able to bring in a higher amount of behavior change.
All right. Uh, so thank you, sir, for that. And now I have some questions for you myself. Firstly, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Uh, so I wanted to ask whether how will the problem of marine litter and water pollution be tackled by circular economy?
So, why does marine litter happen? We do not dispose of our waste properly. The waste then moves into water bodies in cities or in villages, goes into rivers, rivers flow into oceans and seas, and that is how marine litter happens. Now,
Right, sir.
the first step, of course, is the fact that we choose not to dispose of our waste properly. The moment we talk about behavior change, the moment we talk about the fact that we need to source aggregate, the moment we talk about disposing of our waste in an environmentally sound manner, all of these problems can be addressed and marine litter can be reduced to the maximum. Marine litter as a problem is also about the fact that we do not have enough infrastructure and capacities to manage such things. In order to be able to do that, we need to ensure that the development of infrastructure is in sync with the quantum of consumption that is taking place as well. If we are consuming more and we don't have the infrastructure to manage the waste that comes out of consumption, then you will never be able to manage waste and it will remain in the ecology. It will move into such kind of ecosystems which will be harmful for the total, say, marine or bio life that is
Right.
available. this particular
So
place.
we need more water maintenance facilities.
Water maintenance, we need more waste management facilities. We need to be able to manage our waste properly. We need infrastructure for that. We do not have it right now. Why do you think, where do you stay?
Sir, I stay near Harinagar.
Harinagar. Have you ever been to, have you ever kind of driven to the north side of Delhi where you have taken the road which goes to Chandigarh?
Yes,
Do you
sir.
see that huge mountain of waste which comes on your right, huh?
Hmm.
Which is the
Yes.
Bhalaswa landfill? Why is it there? Because we do not have the management facilities to manage all of that stuff within the city or maybe even outside of it. We just kind of piled it up over there because somehow, somewhere we realized that the social fabric which existed in there, in and around that particular Bhalaswa landfill, wouldn't be able to fight with us and we could dump all our waste in areas where they
Hmm.
stayed. And there's people who stay over there still. But just
Right.
because they do not have the social strength, the wherewithal to fight with you, you can actually dump all your waste over there. There are such places which exist in Delhi. There are three such mountains. Okay. So we need to be able to ensure that this kind of behavior change happens within all of us so that we can be more aware about the fact that the ecosystem in which we thrive, it is interconnected, and that is what helps us to thrive. If we destroy the ecosystems, we will not thrive, we will not live. So we need them. They do not need us.
All right, sir. So I have two more questions. The first one being, how is the circular economy going to fight food waste? Since there's a lot of food waste, wet waste going on everywhere in India and throughout the world, actually.
Just compost it at your home. Segregate your waste and compost it.
Is
Compost
there?
it within your locality.
Hmm.
Compost it within your colony. You can do that. It's not very difficult. It's not very difficult at all. And there are people who do it. I have personal friends who do it. They have set up small organic waste composters in their homes. They have put it in their balconies. It does not stink. That's the wrong perception. They just kind of have to roll it 10 times in a day. That you can do. Not a big deal. Anyone can do it.
Right.
All you need to do is just open up a small lid and all the organic pieces that you have, just throw it inside it. But before that, segregate your waste. Put all the wet stuff in it, compost it, and use it in
Hmm.
your small gardens whenever the compost comes out.
Right.
Not very difficult, but something which we don't want to try because we have these perceptions about wet waste stinking.
Hmm.
But if we manage it properly, it does not stink.
Right. All right, sir. So one more question. Coming back to water, how does circular economy apply to water? Because isn't there a use of water within the circular economy, within the industries and factories?
Yes, it is, and in fact, what is happening is because we are not able to implement our laws properly. So just go back to 1987.
Hmm.
In 1987, the government first came up with the Environment Protection Act, and the Environment Protection Act was then followed up by the Water Act, the Air Act. Now, the Water Act specifically states that you will have to manage water in a particular fashion, but the compliance towards it is not followed in its entirety because people want to save on pennies. So if you just go outside of Delhi and you see the Yamuna over there, you'll
Hmm.
find the Yamuna has the color which is that of the soil. So you can sense that there is some amount of mud in the river. And you then go back to Okhla and then you check the Yamuna, it is black in color. Because there's so much of chemical leaching which happens from these small factories which are situated along the banks of the Yamuna through the entire sewerage system that it has destroyed the ecosystem where even the fish can't survive. There's hardly any oxygen in that river.
Right, sir.
So all of this that we are doing to destroy these ecosystems, there is something which is not helping us. But how do we get circular economy back into water? If we are able to create shared infrastructure in the form of, say, an effluent treatment plant in around all of these areas and channelize the sewerage system in such a manner that the effluents get treated in that particular plant because before the water is discharged into the Yamuna, you will be able to ensure that you take out those chemicals which are destroying the ecosystem. Those chemicals can then be used once again in some kind of manufacturing or production process as well. But the water is clean enough to be used, one, into production processes, and second, also by human beings because they need water to thrive and survive as well.
Right.
Okay. Develop such kind of marine biotic ecosystems which will help the fish to survive too. So those kind of things are required, but something which does not have a lot of our attention because a lot of people can just get away from this particular problem by saying that I don't eat fish. Why should I be bothered about water?
Hmm.
Okay, but just the fact that you need water for drinking, which everyone
Right.
thinks that it is available for free, so why should I think about it? Just consider a scenario in 25 years where there is hardly any drinking water available. And there are countries which are like that. So if you go to Bangladesh and you go to their national capital, Dhaka, you will not find drinking water. You will only find bottles. There is no drinking water available to the public. There is only water bottle. PET bottles are the only source of drinking water. There is no other supply of drinking water. Today, you can actually use a RO filter or an AquaGuard system to actually purify that water which is coming from your tank and then consume it in your house. You have that luxury. You haven't destroyed the ecosystem to that extent. Bangladesh has. The city of Dhaka has. So any kind of economic activity that you do leads to some kind of destruction for the utility functions that you have.
Hmm.
But then, how do you ensure that you are able to manage both ends of the spectrum? That is what the subject of sustainability is all about. And circular economy is a very important pillar which actually helps you to move towards sustainability. I wouldn't say it is the only pillar, but a very important pillar.
Right, sir.
Thank you, sir, for the informative
Thank you, sir,
session.
for that.
Okay. Any more questions that you guys have?
Not as such, sir. Anyone else?
No question.
Okay,
None
then
from my